Top 5 things parents need to know about behavior in kids with ADHD. Hi, I'm Ryan, and I'm going to give you some real help right now. Number 1, emotional regulation skills are an aspect of executive functioning. Keep in mind that ADHD is an executive function developmental delay, meaning kids with ADHD are approximately 2 to 3 years behind their same age peers in terms of their executive function skill development. So if you have an 8-year-old, they most likely have the emotional regulation skills of closer to a 6 or 5-year-old. If you have a 13-year-old, their emotional regulation skills may be closer to that of a 10 to 13-year-old. Keep in mind, this varies for every kid, so there's really no way to measure this, but I just want you to understand that if your child's emotional regulation skills are several years behind their same age peers, what we have to do is we have to meet them where they're at and have our expectations based on their executive functioning age, not their chronological age. That does not mean that you need to treat them as they are younger. We still need to have age-appropriate expectations modified for their executive function age. The most helpful thing in terms of helping your child develop healthy emotional regulation skills is modeling affective calmness for them. I do have a video on this topic. Affective calmness is when we act calm and show we're calm even when we don't feel calm inside. The reason it's so important to use affective calmness is because for kids with ADHD, if they're emotionally dysregulated and you match their emotions because you're frustrated or upset or whatever it might be, then their emotions are becoming your emotions. And what that really is, it's creating a parent-child codependency. No child, ADHD or not, can learn healthy emotional regulation skills if they're emotionally codependent with their parent. The other thing that's really helpful that I teach in Scaffolding Better Behavior, my parent behavior training program, are called resets and cleanups. Resets are essentially a do-over. So if your child speaks to you in a way that's not okay, what we can say to them is, why don't you do a reset and come back and ask me that when you're ready? What that's doing is it's instead of scolding them for their behavior, we're allowing them to collect themselves and give it another shot and having time to take some space if necessary to regulate their emotions. Think of resets as a way for kids to be able to have a do-over and always to save face when they say or do something that maybe they shouldn't have. Cleanups is my term I use for teaching kids accountability. So for instance, if they did something hurtful to their younger sibling, instead of making them say sorry, which is not even sincere, what we have them do is a cleanup, meaning they do something nice for the person who they said or did something hurtful towards. That's based on the idea that actions speak louder than words. When we teach kids to clean it up, what we're teaching them is saying sorry is not enough. Sometimes we need to take action to rectify things with the person who we hurt. Number 2, cognitive flexibility. Does your child tend to be inflexible? Do they tend to see the world as black and white? Do they have difficulty with compromise, maybe working in groups at school? Cognitive flexibility is also an aspect of executive functioning. The way you help your child become more flexible is through not accommodating their inflexibility. I have a saying, flexibility is cultivated, inflexibility is accommodated. So what accommodating inflexibility means is that you give into their inflexibility. When parents accommodate inflexibility, it causes inflexibility to get worse. It's okay if your child is temporarily upset with you because you're not accommodating their inflexibility. They'll get over it. Kids are not fragile, kids are anti-fragile. And a lot of times parents of kids with ADHD treat their children like they're very fragile, and that's never helpful. I can tell you, I've seen many adults with ADHD who are highly inflexible, and I can tell you that's a problem, particularly when they get into the workforce. So remember, don't accommodate your child's inflexibility, and that will help them to develop greater flexibility. Number 3, negative attention is easier to get and also sustain than positive attention. Many kids with ADHD figure out when they're really young that they can get their parents' undivided attention as well as emotional reactivity through negative behavior. Keep in mind, the ADHD brain is novelty seeking. So if your child realizes they can get your attention and keep your attention through negative behaviors, they're going to do that because it's working and because you're reinforcing it with attention. Often, I hear parents of younger kids tell me things like, he can't calm down on his own. He needs me to help him calm down, and it can take up to an hour. And I tell them that's not accurate at all. He can calm down on his own. He can regulate his emotions. He's doing this because it gives him your undivided attention. I can tell you, I've seen this pattern in families last years and years. So here's what I teach in Scaffolding Better Behavior. We give purposeful recognition and praise to the behaviors we want. We do not give any attention to the behaviors we don't want. When you reinforce negative or unwanted behaviors with your attention and emotional reactivity, you cause them to continue. I promise you. If you're like many parents, including myself, we often don't give our kids enough recognition and purposeful praise for the behaviors we do want. So think about that. You really have to be mindful of telling them that you appreciate their behavior or that you appreciate their resiliency, their flexibility, whatever it might be, because that's going to help them understand what behaviors will get them positive attention. So give purposeful recognition and praise for the behaviors you do want, and do not give attention to the behaviors you do not want. Punishments and natural consequences. Kids with ADHD, including my own son, often become what we call punishment adverse, meaning punishments don't work for them. Why? Because they're so used to getting punished that it starts to not mean anything to them anymore, and they can live just fine without the Xbox or whatever it might be for another day. I want to be really clear. I am not anti-punishment, but I don't believe in useless punishments. What I teach parents is there should be consequences for things where there are consequences in the real world. For example, if you yell at your sibling, "I hate you," there's not a consequence for that in the real world. But if you hit somebody or if you break something, there's consequences for that in the real world. Most importantly, when there is a consequence for something, it always needs to be accompanied by a cleanup, which I spoke about earlier, because that's teaching kids accountability and it's teaching them to make amends to the person who they hurt. Let them experience natural consequences. I see so many families where they do not let their child with ADHD experience natural consequences, and that does a real disservice to a child. Let me give you this quick example from my own life. I once bought my son a gaming chair, and he was putting it together downstairs. I said to him, "You should really let me help you bring it upstairs, because my concern is it's going to get wedged in the stairway and then it's going to be stuck there." And he said no, because my son has a propensity to be inflexible. Well, guess what happened? The chair got wedged in the staircase, and he was sitting there screaming and cursing and sweating. And I had to let him experience that natural consequence before he would be receptive to help. The other reason why I see parents protect their kids from experiencing natural consequences is because they're worried it'll hurt their self-esteem. Here's what's really going to hurt your child's self-esteem: when you treat them as if they're fragile rather than capable and resilient. You send them the message, "I don't have confidence in your ability because I think you're fragile, so I have to protect you from experiencing temporary discomfort." We all have to learn from our experiences, and the way kids actually develop self-confidence is through recognizing their abilities within themselves. I save this one for last because it's the most important one. Parental accommodation makes things worse over time. Parental accommodation is when parents change their behavior to help avoid or alleviate their child's distress. Some examples of parental accommodation could be: you don't go to the restaurant that the rest of the family wants to go to because you don't want to listen to your child with ADHD complain. Or you allow them to sleep in your bed because they're scared of sleeping in their bed alone. Or accommodating their inflexibility. Or not disciplining them when appropriate because you feel sorry for them. There's a lot of research to back this up. When you alter your behavior to protect your child from experiencing temporary discomfort, you are doing them a disservice, and whatever the behavior or the issue is that you're trying to protect them from is going to become worse over time. Unfortunately, I have parents reach out to me in desperation because they've engaged in parental accommodation for so long that their child is basically running their home, and everyone tiptoes around their child with ADHD to keep them placated and to avoid them having outbursts or arguing or whatever it might be. I want to be really clear here. This is not about blame. It's not about what you've done wrong. I believe all parents do the best they can at any given moment with the information they have. If you've been engaging in parental accommodation for a long time, it's time to ask yourself, is what we're doing in our home not going to be helpful to our child in the long term? And I can tell you it won't be. If you're ready to implement practical strategies to make life at home less stressful for everyone and to help your child with ADHD improve their self-confidence, their resiliency, and flexibility, please check out Scaffolding Better Behavior, which is part of the ADHD Dude membership site, and you can also check out the behavior playlist at the ADHD Dude YouTube channel. I'll talk to you soon.